Saturday at 9 p.m. Eastern Time, 6 p.m. on the West Coast. In just a moment, a news conference held earlier today.
Saturday on C-SPAN. George Plimpton will deliver an address at the National Press Club in Washington, D.C. Mr. Plimpton, who is the author of numerous books on a variety of topics and founder of the Paris Review, will discuss his career as a writer. Saturday, beginning at 6 p.m. Eastern, 3 p.m. Pacific Time.
Up next, it's a discussion of the impact of the current events in the Persian Gulf on U.S. relations with Israel. The Union of Orthodox Jewish Congregations of America sponsored the program in Washington today, featuring the organization's newly elected president, Sheldon Rudolph. The news conference was held to express the group's position on arms sales to Saudi Arabia and how the alliance with Israel will be affected by the Arab alliance that's building in the Middle East in opposition to Iraq's annexation of Kuwait.
My name is William Shoval. I'm the Executive Director of the Institute for Public Affairs of the Union of Orthodox Jewish Congregations of America. I'd like to introduce Sheldon Rudolph, the newly elected President of the Union of Orthodox Jewish Congregations of America, and Dr. Mandel Gantrow, who's the newly appointed Chairman of the Institute for Public Affairs. Mr. Rudolph and Dr. Gantrow will be here both to answer your questions. Mr. Rudolph is going to make a short statement. We have statements to give you, and I hope that we'll be able to answer all your questions. Sheldon Rudolph.
Good afternoon. We here at Convention have convened to consider resolutions which are of interest to the community at large, but we would like to focus this afternoon with respect to two very important resolutions which we believe affects not only the Jewish community but the world community. And these are statements which essentially incorporate the resolutions which delegates at this convention have considered and approved. The first statement deals with our great concern and distress about the meeting which is currently taking place between President Bush and President Assad in Geneva. The Syrian president has clearly been branded by the world as one who is guilty of atrocities not only against his own people, but against innocent civilians throughout the world. And Syria is clearly a country which our own State Department has branded as one which supports terrorism as a matter of policy. So we are offended by the fact that the President has seen fit to meet with Mr. Assad. It sends the wrong signals to a free world. It contradicts our historic commitment to the morality in government, and it furthers a very ill-advised policy that led America to build up Saddam Hussein, a policy which we are suffering from today. And unless the meeting between the two presidents, Bush and Assad, can lead to a positive result, and by that we mean a renunciation of terrorism, handing over terrorists who are responsible for the Pan Am 103 tragedy, which took the lives of one of the outstanding leaders of the Orthodox Union, Joseph Miller, may you rest in peace, and frees Syrian Jews who are held captive in Syria today, then we feel that that meeting is an embarrassment to America's democratic principles. And we call upon the President to bring home those things from that meeting. Our second statement deals with the situation in Iraq. And the Orthodox Union repeats and reiterates its support of President Bush's policy of containing aggression in the Persian Gulf. And just recently, before Yom Kippur, myself, Dr. Gantrow, and a few other of us had the opportunity to meet with President Bush in the Oval Office of the White House, and we made that clear statement to him, and he recognized our support, and he thanked us for it. The attempt by Iraq to swallow Kuwait is, of course, a threat to America's global interests, and we are speaking out as Americans. And we feel that a simple withdrawal by Iraq is insufficient unless it is coupled by the dismantling of her nuclear, chemical, biological, and strategic weapon capabilities. The mere withdrawal will not bring an end to the dangers of the free world. We're not unique. We're not saying anything that hasn't been said before, but we reiterate what is absolutely the policy of the Orthodox Union. And finally, and we expressed this to President Bush as well, we are concerned that the pursuit of this anti-Iraq coalition of Arab nations will undermine the traditional United States-Israel strategic partnership. And the recent votes by the United States and the UN condemning Israel is something which we can only and very unhappily see as a deterioration of this relationship. The administration seems to be continuing this policy with respect to the continued Saudi arms sales which the government has approved and which are now already in the works. And I understand that there is a second phase of this policy which is not to meet the immediate dangers which facing the Mideast, but is really building up a Saudi Arabia that can only be a threat not only to peace in the Mideast, but a threat of a potential repeat of the situation we now have. Lindy, you want to join me at the podium and we'll take any questions? Yes, sir.
Yeah, you
Identify.
Neil Rubin from the Washington Jewish Week. You've expressed your concern over President Bush's acquiescence with a lot of the Arab states, particularly Syria, and yet you recognize that there is a fragile alliance that he's attempting to maintain here. Do you have any sympathy for his position, and what should his position be?
Lindy, you want to deal with that?
We agree with the President that the safety and welfare of American troops in the Persian Gulf are of paramount interest. Nevertheless, the time-honored principle that this government has gone to war over so many generations and centuries must be that we must uphold our moral principles, our democratic principles. And although we welcome any and all nations joining with the United States in combating aggression, we are equally concerned with the fact that by joining with this group, we seem to be sending the wrong message. It was not necessary for the President, we believe, to have Syria on board as a member of the team, to go out of his way to fly to Geneva to meet with President Assad at the same time that Syria is on the list of our own State Department as a nation that supports state terrorism, and one that is at the present moment harboring the perpetrators of Pan Am Flight 103, which included American citizens and was directly responsible, as Mr. Rudolph said, for the Marine barrack incident in Lebanon.
Yes.
Howard Rosenberg from the JTA, Jewish Telegraphic Agency. I was wondering if you're aware that President Bush is apparently meeting with President Herzog from Israel in Geneva right after meeting with Assad, and I was curious if that might allay your fears, or how does that bode for future U.S.-Israeli relations? If that.
Well, that is news to us, and of course it is encouraging. Whether it allays our fears or not is really a much more global problem. There are a lot of other things that the government is doing, and of course this is an encouraging note.
I'd like to add, President Herzog, as you know, that is news to us. President Herzog is the president of the State of Israel, but unlike the President of the United States, he is a national figure, but he does not become involved in day-to-day policies of the State of Israel. And we would hope that this meeting with the President of the State of Israel is but a harbinger of future meetings between the President and Secretary Baker with the active leaders of the government, the present government of the State of Israel, to help cement the relationship that has heretofore been in existence.
Can I say something to that?
Sure.
I think it's important that we recognize that to compare meetings with the President of Syria and the President of Israel is completely erroneous. Aside from the fact that the President of Israel is much more of a titular head, not the head of the government, it's also important to recognize that Israel is the United States' staunchest ally in the Middle East, and Syria is a nation that has been harboring terrorists, is on the State Department's watch list in terms of harboring terrorists. So to draw the parallel between having a meeting with President Herzog and President Assad of Syria is completely not appropriate.
Yes.
Yeah, Neil Rubin from the Washington Jewish Week. To follow up on my previous question, I understand your position on Syria, but what role do you think Syria should play in this coalition? And how will that affect Israel 1 year, 2 years, 3 years down the road?
I don't know that we can answer that. We're not privy to the secrets of the military of the United States or combined efforts in the Persian Gulf. But we would hope that out of this will come a determination on the part of our State Department and administration to convince Arab nations that once and for all they must sit down at the table and have direct negotiations with Israel to end the state of war, to end the economic boycott, to free, for example, in Syria, Syrian Jews who are longing to be reunited with their families in Israel and to go where they desire, to renounce state terrorism. And if that good comes of this bloc of nations, then of course we applaud it, and that would be the most wonderful thing in the world. To this moment, we do not see any type of sign that this is the case. Rather, President Assad has a long-standing rivalry with the Iraqi leaders, so that his aim may not be in consonance with the aims of the United States. They are still a terrorist nation, and they do not have a democracy. And we should always stick with our democratic principles.
Any other questions?
Yaakov Konrak, Jewish Outreach. As you know, there's been a lot of comments from American public opinion questioning the level of American involvement in the defense of Saudi Arabia. At the same time, there have been attempts by the Arab nations and Iraq to draw Israel into the conflict. I wonder if you would care to put into perspective the relative commitment of the United States to Saudi Arabia in this crisis versus its traditional alliance with Israel over the years.
Well, I thought I referred to that earlier. The current Saudi arms package is something which certainly the Jewish community in the States did not oppose. We understood that it was needed for the exigencies of the moment. What frightens us is the second phase and the long-term commitment to Saudi Arabia, which we consider to be a threat not only to Israel, but to peace in the entire Mideast.
I'd like to just add another two thoughts to the question that was asked before about our relationship with Syria. The United States, as late as the day before the Iraqi invasion of Kuwait, and certainly to a greater proportion in April of this year, was encouraging the government of Iraq by selling them all type of strategic material. And over the years, over the objection of the State Department, the Commerce Department and other departments went ahead with these sales. And senators visited, 5 senators visited Mr. Hussein in April of this year and giving him encouragement. On the day before the invasion, the Assistant Secretary of State, testifying before the House Foreign Affairs Committee, indicated that the United States would not be involved if the Kuwait was invaded by Iraq. So we sent them the wrong signals. What we are concerned about is that we are repeating these same mistakes, or potentially repeating these same mistakes, in our relationship with the Syrian dictator. One other point, we believe that this is analogous to the conditions that occurred in the late 1930s when Great Britain, realizing that it was going to have a war with Nazi Germany, attempted to neutralize the Arab nations that existed at that time in the hope of keeping them away from the Nazi side and having them join Britain. And therefore, their response at that time was to restrict Jewish immigration and to restrict the sale of land in Palestine to Jews. As a result of that action, millions of Jews died in the concentration camps and the gas chambers of Europe. But Britain did not benefit from this policy because most Arab nations were either pro-Nazi or were neutral. We will not gain as a nation. Neither our moral standing nor our long-term goals will not be met by our dealing with dictators at their level.
At this point, should I say thank you, Mr. Smith? And that usually ends the press conference.
Anybody else?
Thank you very much.
Earlier this week, week, Representative Romano Mazzoli of Kentucky and Representative Henry Hyde of Illinois were our guests to talk about the situation in the Persian Gulf. You may see